Welcome to your weekly college basketball bracketology update with America's number one bracketologist, Bracketdom of bracketometry.com. He's 124 spots better than ESPN's Joe Lunardi and 178 spots above CBS's Jerry Palm, according to Bracket Matrix. So if you really want to know where your team stands, you've come to the right place. Okay, how you doing, buddy?
Doing fantastic. How about yourself? Thanks for having me.
Great. The season started. What's better, right?
Absolutely. We got college basketball on. I got some on some screens right behind me right now. Nothing better than having it.
You're in the bracketology bunker. Excellent. All
Indeed.
right. All right, Tom. So since the season's beginning, it's now what it just began. The reality is we really don't know anything about where teams sit, aside from just random projections. You could certainly just make stuff up, but that's not how you roll. There's a reason you're number one. Kind of explain to people out there, how do you get graded out as a bracketologist? What makes a good bracketologist?
Absolutely. So a lot of times I feel like some of the big names, they really focus on just how many teams they got in and how many they missed. And absolutely that's a huge part of the score. But I think most competent bracketologists are usually getting the same amount or comparable teams in. It really is about getting those teams on the correct seed lines. And that's how it's graded. You get 3 points extra if you get them on the right seed line, bonus points if you're within one. So if you hear bracketologists bragging out there about, oh, I got so many out of so many teams right, that their bracket could have been a mess, though, with teams nowhere near where they were supposed to be seated. And that's really where the meat of it comes in. I mean, anyone can come off the streets and just copy what they see from most people and get the right teams in. But yeah, really breaking down the differences between those seed lines and getting teams on the right ones, that's where the differences come in.
And so looking forward to this year, obviously that's one of the important parts of seeding is, of course, where conferences rank, right? So what are the top conferences and how would you rank them right now? Again, we don't know a lot of information because we just had one, sometimes maybe two games.
Absolutely. No, I think towards as far as the Power Five, and of course sorry about that. Yeah, as far as the Power Five goes, including the Big East, obviously in college basketball, I think towards the top, they're all actually very comparable this year. I mean, you look at the top of the AP poll right now for what's that worth, and in the top 10, you have a nice spattering of pretty much all teams from the top five conferences. So looking at it from that front, you would think, oh, they're all about equal. Now, I think three of them kind of separate themselves from the mix, though, when you really start looking at the depth of those conferences. In the ACC, Duke and Louisville, very good teams, contenders for a national championship, arguably. And I don't think they really have much after that. And same in the Big East. Connecticut, St. John's, very good teams, could make deep runs, could potentially win it all. But that's probably really all they have in that regard. Then I think the big three power conferences this year are going to be the SEC, the Big 12, and the Big 10, because not only do they have title contenders, they have several title contenders. You could probably go 5 or 6 teams deep in each one of those. And any of those teams could win the whole thing, and it would not surprise me. Like you said, it's really hard to kind of separate them right now. I might have said before the season started that the SEC was better than the Big 12, and then Arizona beats Florida, who I had Arizona maybe finishing 5th or 6th in the Big 12, and I thought Florida was going to win again in the SEC. So it really is a jumble up there at the top, but I think those three conferences are going to separate themselves because not only do they have the title contenders on top, they have the depth as well to back it up.
So then when you look at the AP, you mentioned it's not worth a whole lot and it is just, sort of, you kind of you stay there until you lose and then you kind of go back. It doesn't really have a reflection of the top 25 teams at the winning time. But anyway, it is a good way of sort of separating teams, or at least pushing, games, I suppose, like number one versus number 4. So when you look at the preseason rankings, you mentioned the number of teams or title contenders. There's a good smattering of teams from different conferences. Who do you see as the most overrated and underrated teams going into with the preseason polling?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, it might feel like a little bit of a cop-out since they just lost, but I do think now that Florida has lost to Arizona, they probably are a little bit overrated there in that spot, and that probably should have been obvious from the beginning. A lot of times those defending champions always get a little bit of a boost in the preseason odds and the preseason rankings just because they're the defending champions. We got to give them respect, but it's college basketball where there's a ton of roster turnover every single year. So just because they did it last year doesn't mean they're going to again. And had they lost in the Final Four last year, which they absolutely could have, they probably wouldn't have been anywhere near as high as they are now. And should that have an effect? It probably shouldn't, but it absolutely does. In terms of teams that are underrated, I said there's a nice spattering of the conferences there at the top, but there really is only a spattering of teams from those 5 conferences. The only other team that's even in there right now is Gonzaga, who's down at 21. Will they choke in March? Very possibly, but I think in terms of that roster, they probably should be a little bit higher just in terms of the talent they have. And I think there's some other mid-majors not getting respect right now. I think San Diego State out of the Mountain West has a very good team this year. I think the Mountain West itself might be down. They're not going to be fighting for 6 bids like they have been the last couple of years, and that might keep them from getting the resume that they deserve. But I think they're very good this year and could make another run. Maybe not back to the national championship like they did a few years ago, but definitely get themselves in contender range. So I think they should be ranked.
And so then looking forward to the week until we meet again, what are the key matchups and things that are going to affect seeding for coming up for college basketball fans? Obviously this weekend and maybe up through Wednesday or so.
Absolutely. No, one of the first ones I'm looking at this Saturday, Alabama St. John's. I think those are 2 very comparable teams that could be fighting for high seed lines, but I think that one's just big for the Big East as a whole. Like I said, Alabama and St. John's, they might be comparable, but the SEC has 5 or 6 or 7 teams that are about on that level. St. John's, it's really just them and UConn, with maybe an argument for Creighton being, they're a tournament team, but I don't know about a contender. So if St. John's and Connecticut aren't winning their big out of conference games against the other top teams in some of those deeper conferences, it's going to be hard for them to dig themselves out of that early hole potentially without as many Q1 potential games in their own conference. So then just looking at the Saturday after that, BYU, UConn, it's doubling down on the Big East. If UConn and St. John's were to lose both of those, then they're not off to a hot start. And where are they going to really bounce back in conference? And that one I do want to focus on as well because of BYU. And they're all the way up at number 8 this year, have the number 1 recruit in the nation. Really excited to see that if they're able to live up to the hype, because I haven't seen BYU up this high since the Jimmer Fredette days. So it could be fun to see if they live up to it. But definitely against UConn is a real prove it and show that you do deserve to be here kind of game.
And so, and also you'd say probably with those 2 teams as the top of the Big East, if they were to lose both of them or win both of them, it can really significantly affect other teams in the conference, right? As far as the seeding goes for them.
Exactly. If the Big East is trying to get several teams in, their top teams getting big out of conference wins is a huge proponent for that, because now if you get a Creighton or a Marquette beating those Connecticut's and St. John's in conference, now those are looking like much better wins. So it kind of brings the whole conference up as a whole and allows them to get more teams in. If their best teams are losing their big marquee games early on, then it's not really going to warrant them getting a ton of teams in like some of these other conferences. So yeah, big for them and big for the rest of the conference as a whole, for sure.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And we're going to sign off there. So make sure you tune in weekly. We'd love to answer your questions. So please send them over to Dom at Bracketdom on X. You can see the little thing scrolling at the bottom of your screen. So until next week, we'll see you later.
See ya.